Hvala, predsednik. I'm very happy that we have a guest from Wiesbaden, Germany. With us is Thilo von Debschitz, and he is graphic designer. And he's incoming president of his club. So I congratulate him first on this nomination. And he's leading a graphic design studio and also lectures in RheinMain University. And he's visiting us with very interesting lecture on the topic of Dr. Fritz Kahn and his marvelous journey through human body. And I'm glad that we have in audience architect, painter, designer, and I think a doctor also. So the audience is set, and I'm glad, Theo, welcome to Ljubljana.
Voila. Thank you so much. And that's a great crowd. Illustrators, architects, painters, medics. This is the perfect audience for me. Thank you very much. And let's now share my screen. And you just have to tell me if it works. Can you see and read the type?
We can. Dobro večer.
Hvala. Hvala.
Hvala.
Okay, Hvala actually is the only thing I can say. Or maybe slon, elephant. I don't know if this is also correct. Slon?
Yeah,
okay.
Bravo.
Okay,
Super.
Okay. And Soko Okolovo. But this is not about your language. It's about Fritz Kahn today. And yes, as Edward mentioned, I'm 55 years old here in Wiesbaden, Germany, in the middle of Germany. And I'm a member of the Rotary Club Wiesbaden-Kochbrunnen. I used to curate the talks. We meet every Thursday. So tomorrow at noon we will meet, and we have a sopranist. She will talk about how it is to be an artist, a singer during Corona, when you are not supposed to have concerts. So my talk today is about Fritz Kahn and his adventurous journey through the human body. And in the next couple of hours, I will introduce you to Mr. Kahn, and I hope that I can pass on the Kahn virus to you. I decided that my talk should at least give you the answer to three very important questions. How fast does your hair grow? How long can you live without food? And how does the erection work? I stumbled upon the images of Fritz Kahn by coincidence some years ago, and I was blown away. The visuals I found were really fascinating. But I also discovered that Kahn's oeuvre was mostly forgotten because of Nazi censorship. There was no Wikipedia entry, no information about Fritz Kahn as a person, no summary of his works. So for all of you being not familiar with Fritz Kahn, I'm happy to change that. For a better understanding of Fritz Kahn's work, I would like to take you on a short trip into history, 100 years into the past, to the era of the Weimar Republic in the city of Berlin. Back then, Berlin, with its 4 million inhabitants, was the biggest city in Europe and the third biggest city in the world. But Berlin was somehow chaotic, a place of glittering wealth on one side and dark poverty on the other side. Beggars and veterans of the First World War crowded the streets, while at the same time the art and culture scene flourished. Modern production methods standardized and rationalized the working environment. Here we see workers in a factory for vacuum cleaners in Berlin. Other industries were affected as well. Around 100 years ago, the car company Opel introduced assembly line work in Germany. In 1923, Berlin Tempelhof Airport was opened. By the way, after only 4 years of construction, which at least in Germany is almost unthinkable today. And the electric railway was invented during the Weimar Republic. In general, electrification expanded dramatically during the 1920s. This is the control room of a Berlin power plant at that time. Just to give you an idea, from 1925 to 1930, the number of households in Berlin with electricity tripled from 25 to 75%. In the 1920s, a nationwide telephone network was established. Here you see a room with female switchboard operators. The most important source of information was newspapers. Never again will there be more daily and weekly newspapers in Germany than at the end of the Weimar Republic. In 1931, there were 4,000 daily and weekly newspapers in Germany. Today, we have no more than 350. Thanks to technical printing innovations, the newsstands also offered many magazines full of fascinating images. But not only printed material fulfilled the need for entertainment and information, new media also entered everyday experience. For example, the cinema became very popular. Big movie theaters sprouted like mushrooms. In 1924, radio broadcasting began in Germany. Today, radio is mostly perceived as a minor medium and we don't pay much attention to it. But in the 20s, it was truly a revolution. People dressed up and came together to listen to the radio. Because of this media variety, people had more access to information than ever before. Social and individual behavior were radically changed. And in the midst of this exciting time, in the middle of Berlin, lived and worked Fritz Kahn. Here we see him aged 40 with his 4-year-old son Emanuel in 1928. I'll come back to Emanuel at the end of my talk. Fritz Kahn was born on September 29th of 1888. He studied medicine in Berlin and then opened a gynecological practice. In addition to his work as a doctor, he wrote more than 20 books explaining the complexity of natural sciences and the human body in everyday, non-scientific language. Most of his books became real bestsellers and translated into many languages, probably also in Slovenian. His main opus was a book series entitled Das Leben des Menschen, Life of Man, published between 1922 and 1931. What makes these popular science publications special is their large number of images, which was not known before. These 5 books contain 1,200 visuals. This is a page from a folder promoting the book series and emphasizing the volume of images. Fritz Kahn was a genius in creating concepts for illustrations that combined both entertainment and information. He did not produce the visuals himself, since he had no drawing skills. Kahn collaborated with people like you, graphic designers, illustrators, painters, sometimes with architects, who brought his ideas to life. And from the giant treasure of visualization methods in Fritz Kahn's books, I'll present a small selection today. At first, Kahn was a master of analogy. He implemented the technological progress of his time in his imagery and depicted physiological processes by comparing nature and technology, man and machine. This image is entitled Biology of a Roast Smell. It describes the smelling process from the olfactory sensation to salivation as if it's happening in an industrial lab. In the upper right, switching connections are depicted just as we saw before in the photo of phone operators. Assembly line work is the analogy in this illustration, which explains the act of mastication. In the upper part, the functions of the different teeth are compared with tools. In the lower part, workers are sitting at an assembly line demonstrating the shapes and functions of the tongue's taste buds. I mentioned the new movie theaters at that time. This visual describes what goes on in our heads when we see a car and say the word for car. After a projection into the inner eye, a mental movie projector runs a reel. A projectionist identifies the car as a car and sends his conclusion to a colleague who presses a keyboard to form the word auto in the voice organ. In this illustration, Kahn indicates that a car is shaped like the human ear. He presents similarities and the hidden structures of 2 totally different objects. While the enthusiasm for cars was rising at that time, Kahn picked up that vibe to explain human organs, comprehensible not only for technophiles. This is the famous visual Der Mensch als Industriepalast, Man as Industrial Palace from 1926. This life-size poster was included in the third volume of the book series Das Leben des Menschen and also used as a wall chart for school teaching. It's indeed the only Kahn image that's still preserved in the collective consciousness, although its originator went mostly forgotten. The illustration presents the human body as a modern industrial company. In the upper stories, we see office workers wearing suits and white lab coats. Here the people think, read, and discuss. The nervous system is compared with the switchboard, and the nerves themselves are depicted as electric wires and cable connections. In the lower area, there's a big industrial plant with tanks, tubes, measuring instruments, and conveyor belts. Workers wear factory uniforms and are physically engaged, for example, in the liver, which is shown as a chemical factory. Most people would be uncomfortable with a realistic insight into the human body. But when it's visualized like this, the inner body is attractive and exciting for both young and old. With analogies like this, Kahn was also able to deal with taboos in a smart way, for example, with sexuality. This image is entitled Technical Schematic Representation of the Male Erection System. In the lower left, we see the male sex organs keeping the brain in electric suspense. This makes the brain receptive to an erotic impulse, in this case, an undressed lady. As a metaphor for sexual excitement, a ball is set in motion and has to overcome moral resistance before it descends and sets off a series of signals from the spinal cord to the spongy veins of the penis. But Fritz Kahn's ideas reached far beyond comparisons of the human body with technical devices. Here we see a juxtaposition of the shell of a walnut and a human skull. The outer rind on both is so stable that it safely protects its interior. In this image, Kahn explains the meaning of clothing with a thermos flask analogy. At the left, we see a man with several clothing layers. On the right, the layers of a thermos flask. Each textile layer corresponds with a layer of the flask. In Kahn's books, we also find classic information graphics as we know them from nowadays. Some of them don't need further comments. This, for example, shows the food's journey through the bends of the intestines. The little clock indicates the speed of the food. This is a comparison of tea consumption measured in grams per person from the year 1926. Not very surprising, British people drink the most tea. But German tea consumption has increased continuously since 1840. The teapots are getting bigger since then. And this is the consumption of coffee measured in kilograms per person. Here are the Dutch and the Belgians in the lead. This visual tells us how long creatures can survive without food. Each of the 8 parts of the illustration includes 4 tier-off calendars, symbolizing the time factor. Over 4 years, the calendar pages pile up to a big paper mountain. And we learn a bird dies of hunger after 9 days. Humans can continue without food for up to 3 more days. And some insects can live without food for more than 3 years. Now let's do a little quiz. What do you think? How long does your hair grow per day? What do you think? You can use the chat or just shout it. What do you think? Make a guess. What's the daily hair growth in average?
1 millimeter per day.
1 millimeter, okay.
0.
15 Millimeter in einem Monat.
Now I have to, this is like 1.5 millimeters per day, right?
No. Divided through
0.5,
30.
half a millimeter.
Half a millimeter, okay. What is 2 microns?
2 micron is 100.
1000.
Yeah. Nein.
Okay. On a rainy day, this is nice. Okay, so let me solve the quiz. If you combine all of your hair into one single hair, your daily hair growth would reach a length of 30 meters. 30 meters per day. Every 40 minutes, that hair would grow 1 meter. So if you combine all the hair, of course, this was a tricky question, but this is an example for another visualization strategy you often encounter in the publications of Fritz Kahn based on absurdities. With exaggerated depictions, Kahn astonished his readers about the incredible human body's performance. Some more examples. The connecting tissue and ligaments in the pelvis are so strong that you could go on a balloon ride suspended from them. As the strongest of all the large bones, the human shin bone is so strong that it can support a 1,650 kilogram load. That equals the weight of 21 men, all standing on the shin bone without breaking it. And here is a depiction of a technical and biological miracle. The small human abdominal cavity houses not only stomach, liver, kidneys, pancreas, and urinary bladder, but also 8.5 meters of intestines. 8.5 meters. Each human body contains an average of 25 billion blood cells. Joined together to form a chain, they would encircle the world 4 times over. Or let us take a look at the heart's amazing performance. It is so strong that it can move an elevator up 5 floors in 40 minutes. The heart could fill 3 tanker trucks with 10,000 liters of blood in the course of 1 day. And it pumps 250 million liters of blood in 70 years, enough to fill that skyscraper. This illustration presents the average human being's food consumption in 70 years as calculated by Fritz Kahn. For example, 4,000 kilograms of meat, 6,000 loaves of bread, or 12,000 liters of coffee. Of course, Fritz Kahn did not work in isolation or outside the political circumstances of his time. Fritz Kahn was Jewish. In the 1930s, he was forced to close his medical practice. And after the Weimar Republic failed, he was one of many authors whose books were banned and burned. He decided to leave Germany and began a long odyssey to Palestine, England, France, Spain, and Portugal. Eventually, in 1941, when all of his options were nearly exhausted, Albert Einstein, Kahn's friend from his time in Berlin, helped him get a US visa and escape from Lisbon. In the States, he continued publishing books and articles, but he never again achieved the creative brilliance of his earlier publications. And Fritz Kahn never returned to Germany. He died in Switzerland in 1968. Here's a final visual example of Kahn's work from 1939. The image is entitled "The Doctor of the Future." We see a doctor in an urban, loft-like environment at a modern desk. He's not in physical contact with his patient. Instead, he's looking at a big media wall. By pressing buttons, the doctor connects with his patient and makes a remote diagnosis via screen, radiography, and measurement devices. Through speakers, even the patient's heartbeat is transmitted. The patient is on the other side of the globe, lying sick in the cruise ship India, somewhere on the ocean. That's not much different from a Zoom chat. You see, Fritz Kahn predicted telemedicine 50 years before it became routine. So this is how Kahn conceived the times in which we are living today. And with this visionary image, we return from our time travel back to the present. And along our way back into present, we find numerous interpretations of Kahn's most popular image, the Industriepalast. These are 2 book covers from Great Britain. On the left is a title created by pop artist Edoardo Paolozzi from the year 1972. On the right, a Guardian cover illustration by Sam Falconer from 2015. In 2006, designer Carlo Giovoni and art director Renata Steffen created the illustration on the left to demonstrate how food gets transformed into human waste, or as they say in Brazil, coco. Little funny workers operate the transformation process. Like the erection illustration by Kahn I showed before, this man-machine visualization might be the only way to handle subjects which are usually a big taboo. The piece on the right is entitled The Human Factory and was created by designers Sandro Falsetti and Mario Cano for a publishing house in Sao Paulo in 2007. It gets very close to the original. There are only just a few adjustments. For example, there's a satellite dish in the audio center or a computer on a desk at the intellectual center. And some of the workers in the lower body part have been replaced by machines. I don't know if you can see it, but in the industrial area, there are only 3 guys left. There's also a number of creators in Europe. Do you listen? Do you hear the sound in the background?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So there are other creatives inspired by Fritz Kahn, left an illustration by Philipp Schieferdecker for the Süddeutsche Zeitung. And in 2009, German designer Henning Lederer created his final year project at an English university. He decided to produce an interactive installation. And you see the original Industrie Palace of Fritz Kahn as a moving image. 5 different circulations within the body can be operated separately. And here you see them working all together. Here are 2 more interpretations from recent years, which we found during our research, left an adaptation of Homer Simpson in a Fritz Kahn style from Matt Groening. Right, an illustration taken from the Dutch book Het Wonder van You by Jean-Paul Sutton, published in 2015. More things we found. At first, the originals by Fritz Kahn. On the top left, there's a visual about the adaptation of the eye, depending on the lightness in day and nighttime. The illustration on the upper right was used to demonstrate the impact of sunlight on the skin. In the second row, there are similar images from 2 different book editions of Das Leben des Menschen, comparing a muscle-nerve connection from the fingertip to the motoric center in the brain, with a wave from the bell button to the doorbell. And we were so happy when we saw that people decided to wear these pictures as tattoos, and that Fritz Kahn has recaptured mass appeal in the here and now. In 2017, some creative guys in Paris discovered our book on Fritz Kahn. They were so enthusiastic that they contacted me, and we collaborated on a very successful iPad game based on Kahn's Industriepalast. The name of the game is Homo Machina, and it's available at the App Store and Google Play Store. Fritz Kahn would have been very pleased by it. So the green book on the left was our first Kahn monograph, published in 2009. It is sold out, just like the books we published at Taschen in 2013 and 2017, a new edition. It's a heavy brickstone-like book with more than 500 pages, more than 350 images, and it's available in 6 languages, unfortunately not in Slovenia, and they are all sold out at the time. So if you are interested in more background information and in inspiring visuals, you may take a look into our publication as soon as it is available. I hope I was able to raise some interest in the work of Fritz Kahn, but here is an epilogue. To be honest, I never planned to publish a book like this. It all started with a coincidence. And together with my sister Uta, I searched through international archives to make Kahn's fabulous work visible again. It has been an unbelievable pressure of work and input of energy and money, beside keeping a family and running a design studio. But on the other hand, it was also a lot of fun to discover the inspiring work of Fritz Kahn. And it was even more fun to experience wonderful encounters like today, opportunities, making new friends, and enjoying emotional moments in context with this project. So now at the end of my presentation, I would like to share one of these special moments with you. You remember the little 4-year-old boy on the photograph at the beginning of my presentation, Emanuel, the son of Fritz Kahn. He and his wife Shoshana became good friends during our search for traces of his father. Emanuel himself could not tell us a lot about his father. He spent years of his youth as a foster kid in Great Britain to be protected from the Nazi regime, and he was never able to establish a close relationship to Fritz. So he was very excited about what we would pull up. In 2009, at the same week when the copies of our first book arrived from the bookbinder, Emanuel Kahn, this little boy, was about to celebrate his 85th birthday, which is 81 years after this photo was taken. So we decided to surprise him in Brooklyn on his birthday. I took a plane to New York. My sister Uta stayed in Berlin. And our plan was that Uta would call the Kahns at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I ring the doorbell at exactly the same time. This is how we wanted to hand the first book about Fritz Kahn as a gift to his son. That moment was worth all our efforts of traveling, researching, writing, scanning, retouching, proofreading, spending money, etc. I videotaped this moment so that my sister could watch it later. Apologize for the poor frame rate due to Zoom. So please imagine me standing at the front door of the Kahn house. My heart is beating fast. I rang the bell, and Shoshana, Emanuel's wife, is about to open the door in a few seconds. Oops. not working. Just a second.
Weißt du, wer das ist? Ein ganz schrecklicher Mensch. Ein Bruder von dir.
Ein ganz großer, dunkler Mensch.
Thilo! Uta, das geht es doch gar nicht. Dann geh weg, du bist ein Gespenst. Was? Bist du auch hier? Um die Ecke?
Nein, ich bin in Berlin, ganz ehrlich. Aber wir haben gedacht, wir können das zusammen überreichen auf diese Weise. Und das
Oh mein Gott, ich glaube es gar nicht. Lass dich mal anfassen. Mano, guck, wer da gekommen ist. Du glaubst es nicht. Ein Gespenst aus Deutschland. Guck dir das an, Mano, du glaubst das nicht.
Happy birthday.
Guck dir das an, ein Gespenst aus Deutschland. Guck dir das an. Was?
Du sprichst mit der Ute noch am Telefon?
Ja.
Uta ist nicht da, ich
Ist er
bin da.
weg?
Ich bin des Geburtstags.
also nochmal herzlichen Glückwunsch und hier ist unser
How do you like that? Manuchen, guck, wer da gekommen ist.
Alles Gute zum Geburtstag. Happy Birthday.
Oh, danke schön. Danke.
Ein Buch. Oh mein Goodness, gracious. Nein, sowas gibt es nur einmal. Das ist nicht zu glauben. Liederchen, das ist nicht zu glauben. Da kommt die ganze Wiesbaden. Was ist denn das? Ist das Buch schon?
Ja, es ist fertig.
Oh my goodness.
Seit einer Woche ist es fertig.
Oh my goodness.
Congratulations.
Und das sind die ersten Exemplare.
Congratulations.
Das sind die ersten Exemplare aus der Buchbinderei. Und ich habe mir für euch eins geben lassen, damit ich es hierher bringen kann.
Nein.
So gerührt, dass du auf einmal hier unerwartet ankommst. Wirklich, ich glaub's noch nicht. Es ist wirklich ein herrliches Geschenk. Vielen Dank.
Voilà, thank you so much for listening.
Thilo, it has been breathtaking presentation. It was just unbelievable. It's a really enjoyable piece. How to revive a piece of history. Maybe, and I'm abusing my position as a president of the club, and just first question, as always, have any of those pictures or parts of that book been part of any educational course, maybe in the schools?
Yes. As I told you, the Industriepalast poster was used in the school as well to explain the human body. Oh, Anthony Kohn, wonderful to see you.
Yeah, it was. I've heard this. I think the third time. I enjoy it more every time I hear it. This is a great presentation.
It's wonderful to see you. It's wonderful to see you, Tony. This is an international presentation today, an international meeting. Yeah, and just coming back to your question, President. Yes, indeed, many pictures were used for school teaching, and also the Bauhaus professors, when they emigrated to the USA, they also we know that they also used many of the images from Fritz Kahn's books for teaching purposes. So yes, you're absolutely right. An image is worth 1,000 words. So this is why they like to use these images. I know that there are also doctors around in this meeting. I have to say that not all organs he depicted were exactly at the right spot in the body, but he didn't care. He wanted to explain the secret behind it. Yeah, it was used for school purposes as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other question? Yeah, Cyril?
Thilo, yeah. I mean, great stuff. Truly, truly. Two questions. What was the technique that Kahn used predominantly in his work? Was this some kind of airbrush? Because I think that technically also they're quite perfect. And the second question is, what technique did you use? Because you had to gather all the images, to scan them, to photograph them. What was the process of your collection and scanning and adaptation for the purpose of publishing this book?
That's
Thank you.
A professional question. Yeah. Number one, Fritz Kahn never illustrated these images himself. He had no drawing skills. He just made rough sketches. And his son, Emanuel, still remembers that he, as a little boy, walking aside his father, and the father was giving instructions to the designers, to the illustrators, in their 13-room apartment in Berlin-Charlottenburg. They had an apartment with 13 rooms. So he was well off back then, and he used 2 rooms as a studio with illustrators, and they mostly used ink for the illustrations. Question number 2, first we had the problem to find all these old books. So we could make use of antique bookstores, online bookstores, all around the world. And some of these books are quite rare. And supported by Taschen, we scanned all relevant images, like hundreds of scans. And I did some retouching to get rid of the yellow background of the old paper, which was already turned into yellow or a cream. And for the Industriepalast poster, I got rid of all the wrinkles of the old posters, because there were already some holes. Actually, there was just an auction at Sotheby's in London in December of last year, and the poster sold for €2,800. So whenever you find these old books in an antique bookstore, try to get the copy with a folded poster in the back. It's worth 2,800 right now. Yeah, so we did scanning. I was very curious in retouching, because I didn't want to interfere from today. I tried to left as much indication for the 1930s and 1940s as possible, and didn't want to try to make it look contemporary. I think it looks contemporary, but so I don't have to. I should not involve my profession as a graphic designer into that. This work should stand for itself.
Hvala, vielen Dank.
Olim. Micha.
Ja.
Thilo, einfach unglaublich. Vielen Dank. I would just like to thank you. Like in the 90s, I met by chance, not in person, but the book came into my hands, envisioning informations by Edward Tufte.
Yeah.
And subsequently I bought most of his book, devoured them, and this is the second such revelation. So thanks a lot for excellent presentation.
Voila.
Yeah.
Thilo, really, thank you for the excellent presentation. And I was wondering, because I'm sure I saw a few of those images before. I was a little bit researching in Slovenian libraries, and it's very rare, Kahn's work, but I've seen, I'm sure, but I can't remember where. And my question is, how in Germany, where he was somehow erased from the consciousness of the nation, how much people remembered? I mean, his environment, how was this sensed? I mean, how much people remembered and how much was present before the republication of the books and your work?
I don't know if I can really answer your question because I couldn't find any German information on Fritz Kahn before we kind of rediscovered this work. And there was, as I told you, no Wikipedia, although he was a famous man back then in the 20s and 30s. But when we published our books, we received a lot of emails from old people who remember that these images were used in their school when they were little kids. So there might be a place back in the brain or in the subconsciousness that they still remember these images. But on the other hand, the Nazis did a quite well job in censoring this stuff. Not only his books because he was Jewish, but also the sex book because it was a sex book, and because you were not supposed to show a penis, for example, as an image. So it was forbidden by the police to possess one of these sex books, for example, during the Nazi time. So old people surely remember his work, very old people. Like my father is almost in his 90s, and he says that he still remembers some images, but he would never be able to know about the originator. So actually, this is why we meet tonight to honor Fritz Kahn somehow and to get this work back from Nazi censorship.
Thank you.
Maybe just this one comment, Thilo, that when on the other hand, you know, the German culture of 30s and 40s is normally a synonym for Nazism, the paradox of this rich visual culture is that many of these inventive graphic forms, illustrations, were produced by German culture from 30s. And you know, this crazy guy, Nicholson Baker, I have to take off my background. Okay, just give me a sec. Okay, so he saved the New York World Journal, the world, and he bought off the only existing copies of newspaper, and the newspaper features such beautiful works like the display of wealth of one very rich family with all the houses displayed, and also shows, for example, how thin and thinner and higher the skyscrapers will get in New York. It's absolutely beautiful and absolutely forgotten and absolutely lost, because newspapers are such ephemeral thing that they get lost. And I think that what you did is you lost some ephemera from eternal thermal silence and nothingness. But on the other hand, the paradox, once again, I cannot emphasize this enough, that basically Germany invented comics, but it was German art authors who migrated from Germany to New York.
Like Lionel Feininger, for example.
Exactly, yeah. He's, I mean, great artist, but he started as a beautiful cartoonist and drawer of draftsman of comics. So the paradox is that basically, you know, from this history of distance, it's not just Germans being Nazis, but also the purveyors of this extremely rich culture. And you know, in USA, the largest minority is German minority, but it integrated completely, and you know, they're simply part of the states.
Yeah. So, can you tell me the name of the book again, because it looks absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be quite large, and my wife complains because it's one of the largest, doesn't fit on the shelf.
World on Sunday.
Yeah, The World on Sunday, and the story is horrific. You know, it's my wife, she's a librarian, so is my mother. I love quite concretely sometimes librarians, but they did this horrible crime of killing original newspapers. Everything went to this so much famed microfilm, which is horrible, loses all color, detail, and so on. And this guy, Baker, his name is Nicholson Baker. And that's his, I think, life partner or wife, Margaret Bertano, who helped with the book. And yeah, I highly recommend it. You will enjoy it.
Wonderful. Thanks for the recommendation. Actually, my wife complains because these old books I bought in antique stores, they smell. So whenever she approaches my office at home, she says, "Ugh," because we have all these old Fritz Kahn books, and I have not found a technique. Maybe your wife could give me a recommendation to get rid of the smell.
You know, Thilo, my wife also complains about the smell, but in my case, it's me, not the book. So I can help that.
You know, it's a very easy solution for that, because I like old books. I just built a library room and just say the women that have no access to it. So that's my sanctuary. Basically, just the same-minded people could enter. Nobody else. Well, it was enjoyable evening. Thank you very much again for this presentation. I think we all enjoy it very much. It's precious. Then when we get a piece of history that is important, that is precious, that we keep it living, like the last time, and Anthony Cohn did with letters from Kiko. These are important things that connects us with our predecessors, and we just keep the line. Maybe for the future.
And I do know the presentation of Tony, and I admire him for bringing this to light, this great treasure. And I think there's a lot of we can find a lot of things we can learn of in today, like what the people did back then in the 1930s in Germany with the Rotarians. I think we can learn from this. And we can also learn from Fritz Kahn in managing complexity now in our digital era, where we have access to all information. We need people who bring the information in order and yeah, somehow manage the complexity. So I think every Rotary meeting, it's the same in Wiesbaden. We learn a lot. This is what I love about Rotary.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for being tonight. It's another meeting in this Corona time. I'm looking forward to our next one next week. And I wish you a good night.
Voila.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Voila. Vielen Dank. Super.
Bitteschön.
Wiedersehen.